Welcome to folks listening to this recording. We're here, it's December in 2023, and my name is Amy Kush. I am working with the Women Food and Agriculture Network and other partners on a Western SARI grant designed to help inform new and beginner growers who are entering production in the West. Dr. April Ulery and Dr. Ulery and I have been chatting in previous conversations about the interesting nuances of soils in the West and how that relates to soil health, and just the particularities around challenges for growers here in a very arid environment with challenging soil variabilities. And so we hope, as this project is released with deliverables in the form of webinars and interviews, that new growers find some understanding and perhaps a little bit better picture in their heads of what they might expect to be dealing with and managing in specialty diversified crop production. And so I'm going to ask April to introduce herself and share with us where she's at and some of her experiences as a soil scientist.
Thanks, Amy. My name is April Ulery, and I'm a soil scientist. My specialty is environmental soil chemistry, but I've been interested in all aspects of soils and soil science since I first discovered soils back in 1980 when I was working in a soils research lab, washing dishes and just doing mundane laboratory things. At the time, I was finishing up my bachelor's degree in geology, and I didn't even know that there was a discipline called soil science that I could have studied as an undergraduate. So I got both my master's and my PhD in soil science from the University of California at Riverside. I grew up in Southern California, which is semi-arid, xeric. And I moved to Las Cruces, New Mexico, where I am now a professor of soil and environmental sciences at New Mexico State University. I teach several courses, including the Introduction to Soils and environmental soil chemistry, as well as some other fun courses along the way. Soil health is one of the things we used to call soil quality back in the early 90s. Too many people disliked that term because it made them think of environmental quality or water quality or something that was more regulatory and punitive rather than just assessment. So I think the term soil health has grown in popularity and is something that people, everyday people, can understand a little bit better anyway. So I think it was a smart move to use that terminology. And just like we have physical health of our bodies, we know that there's certain indicators that we're looking for. When you go to the doctor, you always get your temperature taken or your blood pressure, things like that. With soil health, there are certain indicators that are kind of considered universal in terms of helping you ascertain how well your soil functions in providing the ecosystem services that it does. But as Amy and I have discussed, a lot of those soil health indicators, while they're all universal and all important, there are different magnitudes of them depending on where the soil and the environment is located. So the fact that we have arid zone soils and semi-arid zone soils out here in the West, especially the Southwest of the country, it's while we can look at some of those same indicators, there's others that might be more prevalent or important, and other such as salinity or sodicity, things like that. And you can't, I guess my point is, and I'm rambling, but my point is you can't hold the same criteria for all soils formed everywhere to set a particular sustainability level or soil health level, in my opinion. That might be, maybe that's exactly what the Soil Health Institute thinks you can do, and so they would be good people to have a counter discussion with as well. But they're based in North Carolina. So there's a big difference between New Mexico and North Carolina. And when we're looking at soils, one of the things that we're finding is that the more information you can get from a broader area and environment, the more it will help you come up with useful models and indicators for all soils. So I'll stop there. That was too long of an introduction, but just know that I'm very passionate about soils. And I also love to eat. So I'm particularly thrilled that you are listening to this interview because you are wanting to help grow crops and medicinal herbs and other useful products to help sustain the human race. And I thank you for that, because I am not a good farmer. So I feel a little bit sketchy even trying to tell anyone else what to do. But I appreciate those who can do it and who will do it. It's a lot of work.
That was a brilliant introduction, April. And I feel like, growers that are listening to this are already benefiting from your extensive knowledge and experience. And I'm curious, I know we sussed out some broader bullet points in terms of soil health, but for new growers that are listening, what, April, are some of the particular challenges you think they might be faced with in regards to soil health, and also maybe adjacently soil fertility, without getting too far in the weeds? Like, what do you think some of those growers might see who are, for example, maybe taking on leadership of a 3 to 5 acre diversified vegetable production operation? And yeah, what do you think folks might come up against?
Uh, that's a really important ecosystem and a really important scale. The small, diverse farms, I think, are very important in being able to try some small plot demonstrations without risking a lot on new management techniques. One of the biggest challenges I think that any new farmer will come up against is, first of all, breaking tradition. And I know this especially in New Mexico, where civilizations have been growing here, growing food here, not just for decades, but centuries or longer when you look back to some of the indigenous peoples. And so while tradition is important and should be respected, uh, there's nothing that says you have to do it the same way everyone else does it. So if you're willing to try something like no tillage or conservation tillage, that is, don't just go in and plow up the whole field. You will be doing yourself a huge favor by not immediately oxidizing and burning off all of your organic matter. So I would say start small and find some practices that are sustainable both economically and physically for you, and be patient with yourself. Keep good records. That's one of the hardest things I know, is keeping good records, figuring out what works and what doesn't, and don't let your neighbors try to persuade you one way or the other. I know if they see what a farmer would consider a dirty field, with a lot of residue left on the top, you'll get a lot of people saying, "Oh, be careful! You're just providing a host for pests, or you're going to have a lot of weeds popping up." That may be true, but part of it is part of your goal is to look at the whole system. You're not just farming for the harvestable above ground crop, but the whole soil system. And if you can improve the health of the soil, the whole farm will improve its health.
I love that. I think that's such great advice for folks. And I don't want to forget about this, but when in one of our previous webinars, a few women farmers all in Colorado were speaking about their challenges with using cover crops to do all sorts of things in regards to building soil health, because of some of the challenges of living here in Colorado and drought and frost dates. But April, I was curious if maybe you could maybe jump into why it's a little more difficult for us here in the West to rely on cover crops as opposed to those who are east of the Mississippi.
Yes, yeah. So water limiting factors are the main thing, but there are a lot of cover crops that are well suited for our semi-arid and even arid regions. And in a way, when you think about it, cover crops and leaving plant residue on the surface of the soil are even more important in our region in order to both conserve soil moisture and reduce wind erosion. And I know it sounds crazy. How can you conserve soil moisture if you're growing a cover crop? Well, you grow cover crops using the extra water with the is that there are cover crops that are drought tolerant, and you don't have to grow them to complete maturity. You're just growing them to maintain the soil surface, get some organic matter, some roots into the surface. So you're stabilizing that surface. And then you can come through with a crimper or put a load of compost or manure on it, and let them just decompose within the soil. So they're providing organic matter, but not necessarily still competing with the crop for water. and in the end, adding more organic matter, even if it's just a little bit here, we can't add 2 or 3 or 4%, but we can add, a 0.5% over time. And even that will help with structure and water holding capacity and nutrient levels.
Yeah, I love that you remind folks that like one doesn't necessarily have to be growing this crop out to maturity. Like
Yes,
just utilizing utilizing the growth habit of the plant in terms of what your own system and eco region can sustain, um,
exactly.
is
Yeah.
good enough, kind of like good enough parenting. Um, Gosh, this is awesome. So, April, I just want to I want to let you run with whatever you're most compelled to continue to dive into, because I know that we we chatted a bit about aggregate stability and how might, growers be working towards developing healthier aggregation in their soils, but we also, I think, have been diving into things like increasing soil structure, which you just mentioned a bit, and nutrient cycling, and and then kind of like overall, how can producers be doing things to foster greater soil health? And yeah, just I feel like wherever you feel compelled to run here is going to be most beneficial to folks listening. Um,
Well, I do have some kind of general advice statements. Something I'd really like to see more people do, and this is something that the New Mexico Healthy Soils Initiative supports, and that is test your soil, get it tested every year, and that's just build that cost into your budget. It doesn't have to be hugely expensive, but collect some representative soil samples and get them sent off to a commercial lab. And if you don't know who to send them to or how to sample or how to interpret the results, then work with your extension agents and your land grant universities. So obviously in Colorado, it would be some place like Fort Collins, where they have some phenomenal soil health extension agents. And we have a lot of great extension agents, both the county agents as well as at the university, here in New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, Nevada. All of these places have great programs, and you really can't um, tell if your soil, what condition it's in, if you don't get it tested. And so the kind of things that we need to be aware of course, are the organic matter content, even though it's not going to be as much as our fellow growers in the east or in a wetter region. But organic matter is still important, and pH is a master variable, the level of acidity or alkalinity. The electrical conductivity will tell you the level of salinity in the soil, and just getting your nutrient levels, your nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. Those are all critical. And extension and research faculty are more than happy to visit you in person, visit your farm, collect samples with you. And if you feel like you're not getting any help from them, then another way to get involved, and of course the Western SARE organization probably has a really good um, what what's it called when everyone's working together, a network. You could always ask people who are in a similar situation. Look on the computer bulletin boards and Instagram feeds, things like that. But one of the things that I would do if I was a farmer trying to start out is I would look and see what kind of surveys are being done nationwide by, say, the USDA, the Department of Agriculture, or the Soil Health Institute, or some of these big universities who have multi-million-dollar grants to look at soils from all over the country and try to evaluate their soil quality. Well, I would contact those people and volunteer my plot of land and say, I'd love to try a couple of different management practices. What can you suggest? And I'll send you my soil if you'll send me the results and help me understand what's going on. And that's a win-win situation for research and production. So don't be afraid to reach out for help. And I know, especially in the West, it is so easy to run into the traditionalists or the people who've always done it a certain way. So you might get some backlash for that, but reach out and see what's working for others, and see how you can try some new things on your plots to make it work for you. But that being said, and here's where I'm gonna give you a warning. That being said, be careful of what I call snake oil salesmen. Right now, soil health is big business. It's huge in research. It's important, all across the board. And that always means that there's some opportunistic folks out there who will try to sell you the perfect, complete organic matter or humus or something. It's like you can't just mine this stuff. It's not something that you can go out and pull out of the ground in one place and then apply to your soil and suddenly turn your soil into a productive Eden. So be aware of people who are trying to sell you things. Being involved with surveys or on-farm demonstrations shouldn't cost you anything. In fact, you should probably get something for your efforts, not having to pay for them, if that makes sense.
That's a really, really good flag, April. And I think really valid, especially in our current climate of soil health opportunists, if you will. Yeah.
Yeah. Especially right now, there's also one of the big markets that's growing is carbon sequestration. So farmers have heard all kinds of things about carbon markets, and just be aware and be careful with some of the deals going on out there.
Yes, and I think that's really good to know for new folks coming into the field, proverbially and literally. What else, April, do you think in terms of the marriage of soil health and soil science and new growers who are concerned with both, gosh, I want to make sure I have a great season of hoop house tomatoes and field brassicas. Um, so folks who are juggling all of these aspects of farm management and business management, but also at the end of the day, wanting to make sure that they are pushing out the best, most nutrient dense, tasty veggies they can, while understanding that at the bottom, at the root of all of this is how well their soils are cycling nutrients, and essentially providing a space for their plants to grow. How would you give advice to someone coming into that world in terms of looking at the fertility of their soil? I know you mentioned encouraging growers, please, pull soil samples, get your, soils tested. What do you suggest for someone who needs and knows that they need a little more support and guidance in, for example, interpreting their soil test results? Are there any, folks that you think growers should be talking to? Are there any labs or certain tests that you suggest?
Yes. Well, I won't mention specific labs, but I know in New Mexico, our extension research faculty have published papers on, what is the appropriate soil test for New Mexico soils. So, that's a great paper. And I'm betting that there are publications, extension publications, similar to those for each state. The important thing is, we all have Google and we all have the internet, and we can find information from all over, and that is a wonderful resource to use. So do look up, how to interpret soil tests, but be aware when you're reading some of these documents, whether they're from Wisconsin or New York or, Florida. That's a different environment than Colorado or New Mexico or Arizona. So be kind of be discriminating, if you will, about where you get your information from. Because although, yes, the principles of soil nutrition and soil health and soil fertility are universal, the application might be different for different environments.
That's a really good, I think, nugget of information for folks to be judicious about. Sussing out sources of information. And is there anything else that you'd been marinating on, April, that you think a new grower should hear?
Oh, thanks for that opportunity. This has been a really fun exercise just to think about. And again, I'm not giving specific advice because, as I mentioned, I can't grow anything anyway. But I'm a soil scientist with caliche in my backyard, so I don't have anything but creosote and mesquite growing back there, which is wonderful because that's what's supposed to be there in that particular environment. And I haven't. I just can't grow tomatoes or zucchini or things like that because I'm using it for its desert function. But what I do want to say is there, the whole direction of farming, in my opinion, has kind of changed over the last few years. Originally it was humans kind of conquering the earth and mining the soil, if you will, for nutrients in order to feed themselves. And we kind of almost attacked the soil in a way that we could, till it and plant whatever we wanted to grow there and then harvest it. But we weren't keeping an eye on the closed loop system. When you think about your farm, think about what you harvest. That's going to contain all kinds of nutrients and carbon, and you're now exporting it from the farm, and you need to return that somehow to the soil. So don't just think of the soil as being a one-way avenue. You've got to feed the soil as much as you have to feed the plants. And a lot of researchers are now actually coming out and saying things like it's no longer sustainable just to feed the plant, just to take your nutrient analysis and only look at what the plants need. You also have to think in terms of what the soil needs to be healthy and sustainable over time. And we're not just talking about a good feeling. We're not just talking about, soil health is, warm hugs and rainbows. We're talking about reducing erosion, both water and wind erosion, which can cause problems. We're talking about issues like resistance to diseases and pests. A healthier soil is going to give you a healthier crop, which will be able to resist more diseases and pests than the scorched earth that just has a lot of synthetic fertilizers added to it. I never believed that at the beginning, but I think people are coming around to a more holistic view of the soil and the farming ecosystem, if you will. So don't be afraid of diversity. Don't be afraid of having inter-row cropping, have some legumes and some grains, have some trees, have some windbreaks. We need to, I think, get away from the idea of the big multi-acre farm that's all monoculture. I think ecologists and soil scientists alike have come to the realization that that's not really sustainable.
For folks listening, April is brilliant, very, very insightful, and we're really fortunate that she was able to join us for this series of informational interviews and webinars. Thank you so much, April.
Thank you. And again, be kind to your local extension agent and don't hesitate to ask them for help.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy.